The Golden State Warriors checked off their biggest priority during the NBA draft by selecting Axel Lendeborg, a move designed to add size and depth on the wing. But the front office is not finished. With free agency opening, there's still a clear need on the roster, and the smart play is to address it before the best available options come off the board. Hey, what's up, everyone? Before we jump into everything today, that like button right there is what decides if this video hits hundreds or thousands of people. 1 second is all it takes, but the impact on this channel is massive. Go ahead and hit that like button right now. Seriously, it's the simplest thing you can do, and honestly, the best way to back this content up, because every single like pushes us further. So hit it now. Golden State could still use a backup point guard, another wing and depth at center. Of those needs, the one that demands the fastest action is the backup guard spot. The reason is simple. Every other team chasing scoring help will be hunting in the same pool, and affordable names disappear quickly once the market opens. There is an important detail shaping this entire conversation. The Warriors are not expected to have a lot of money to spend. The most realistic tool at their disposal is a taxpayer mid-level exception worth roughly $6.1 million. That figure rules out some of the bigger names floating around in speculation, but it does not rule out a player who could meaningfully change the team's second unit. The target, Collin Sexton. The player who fits the budget, and the need is Collin Sexton. The Warriors require a guard who can score, handle the ball, knock down shots, and hold his own on defense. Sexton checks most of those boxes, and the price tag is what makes him so appealing. Start with his scoring, which is his calling card. Sexton owns a career average of 18.3 points per game, built on lightning-quick speed with the ball that lets him attack the paint and finish through contact. For a Golden State bench that often struggles to create offense when Stephen Curry sits, that kind of self-created scoring is exactly what is missing. The shooting numbers tell an encouraging story, too. Sexton has never been a high-volume three-point gunner, but he is efficient and arguably should let it fly even more than he does. He sits at 38.9% from deep for his career. This past season, playing with the Bulls, he pushed that figure to 41% while taking a career-high 5.2 attempts from three per game. That blend of efficiency on rising volume is precisely the trend a contender wants from a rotation guard. So why would a player with that profile be available for around $6 million? The answer is defense, or at least the perception of it. For the first 6 seasons of his career, the criticism was fair. He was viewed as a one-way scorer who gave back on the other end what he produced on offense. The film over the last 2 seasons paints a more flattering picture. In the 2024-25 campaign, his team was 1.4 points per 100 possessions better defensively when Sexton was on the floor. The following season, after a mid-season trade to the Bulls, the impact grew. Chicago was 3.6 points per 100 possessions better on defense with him in the game. That is real, measurable improvement, and it suggests the book on his defense is outdated. There is one more box he checks that matters as much as anything for a Golden State team that values reliability, availability. Over the last 3 seasons, Sexton has appeared in 209 of a possible 246 games. He is also just 27 years old, which means the Warriors would not be gambling on an aging body breaking down over the life of a contract. They would be adding a durable, prime-age scorer at a discount. The other names on the board. Sexton is not the only option being discussed, so it is worth understanding why he stands out. Some observers will float Andrew Wiggins as a target, but his expected salary lands well outside what Golden State can offer, even in the best-case scenario where the team somehow unlocks the larger non-taxpayer mid-level exception of about $15 million. For now, that level of spending power looks unlikely. Anthony Simons is another name tied to the Warriors, and reports indicate they have interest. Simons may be the best pure scorer they could realistically pursue, which is why the front office is paying attention. The catch is that his defensive track record has been shaky, with poor on-off numbers over the past 3 seasons. If the cost of signing Simons and Sexton ends up similar, the defensive edge tips the decision toward Sexton. 2 more guards round out the discussion. Quentin Grimes brings useful scoring, but he profiles more as a secondary ball handler than a true point guard, which is not exactly the hole Golden State needs to fill. DeAnthony Melton is a stronger on-ball defender than Sexton, a genuine pest at the point of attack, but he lacks the offensive punch that the second unit is crying out for. When you stack the options side by side, Sexton emerges as the most complete answer to the problem. He brings the scoring of a featured option, shooting that has trended upward, defense that no longer drags him down, and the durability to be counted on night after night. For a team built to maximize whatever years Curry has left, adding a player who can carry bench minutes and slide alongside the stars in bigger lineups is a kind of move that quietly decides playoff series. The window to act is narrow. The longer Golden State waits, the more likely a rival swoops in with similar offer. If the front office moves decisively, Sexton could be the under-the-radar signing that gives this roster the scoring jolt it has been missing off the bench. While the spotlight has been on which players Golden State should chase in free agency, a separate story from draft night reveals just how much maneuvering went on behind the scenes. As it turns out, the Warriors were not simply sitting back and waiting to make their selection at number 11. They were on the phone, listening to offers, and they ultimately rejected one that would have let them slide down the board. The details have started to leak out, and they shed light on the kind of chess match that plays out during the draft. According to a report from Clutch Point's Brett Siegel, the Oklahoma City Thunder, who control both the number 12 and number 17 selections, put together a package for Golden State. The Thunder offered the 17th pick along with future assets in an attempt to move up and grab center Ade Mara. Here is where the strategy gets interesting. The report indicates the Warriors never actually intended to draft Mara themselves. Instead, they were working the phones to create the impression that they might take him. The goal was to convince both the Thunder and the Charlotte Hornets, who held the 14th and 18th picks, that Mara could be gone at number 11. If either rival believed that, Golden State hoped one of them would panic and put together a strong enough offer to pry the pick loose. In the end, the bluff did not produce the blockbuster the Warriors were fishing for. Golden State held firm, kept the selection, and used it on Yaxel Lendeborg. That decision allowed the Thunder to land Mara one slot later at number 12, exactly the player Oklahoma City had been targeting all along. Should the Warriors have traded down? The natural question that follows is whether Golden State left value on the table. Could the team have accepted the Thunder's offer, dropped down to number 17, and still walked away with Lendeborg? It is a fascinating hypothetical, and working through it requires tracing how the picks immediately after number 11 might have played out. Start with the Thunder. In this alternate scenario, Oklahoma City would have owned the numbers 11 and 12 picks. The most reasonable assumption is that they still take the same two prospects they ended up with, Mara and Bennett Sturtz. Since drafting Sturtz, the Thunder moved Isaiah Joe to clear cap space, a sign of how committed they were to that guard. Sturtz projects as a better shooter and playmaker than Lendeborg, so the logic suggests Oklahoma City was prioritizing him anyway. Neither of those picks threatens Lendeborg's availability. The 13th pick belonged to the Milwaukee Bucks, who selected Nate Ament. Milwaukee is in the early stages of a long-term rebuild, which makes a 19-year-old prospect a natural fit over a 23-year-old like Lendeborg. That selection, too, probably stays the same. Charlotte sits at number 14 and entered the draft hunting for a starting caliber center. Hannes Steinbach was likely their man, addressing a specific positional need that Lendeborg does not fill. That pick also leaves a Warriors target on the board. This is the point where the picture grows murkier and the risk becomes real. The Chicago Bulls held the 15th selection and took wing Dalen Swain. Swain offers more isolation scoring than Lendeborg, though he is not as big or as developed in other areas. The Bulls roster already features Mattis Buzelis, whose best position may be power forward, and the team had just added Caleb Wilson, another forward. That logjam might have made a traditional wing like Swain more appealing than Lendeborg, who projects as a four with the flexibility to slide to the three. Even so, it is hard to imagine Lendeborg would not have been firmly on Chicago's radar and a genuine possibility at 15. The Memphis Grizzlies owned the 16th pick and ended up trading down. After selecting Cam Boozer, a projected power forward, would they have grabbed Lendeborg if he were still there? Possibly, or they might have been open to swapping down a single spot with the Warriors. The uncertainty is the whole problem. The hidden danger. The biggest threat in the trade-down scenario is not even the teams picking ahead of Golden State. It is the teams behind them. There is a strong chance that clubs sitting in the 19 to 21 range were called Chicago and Memphis at picks 15 and 16, looking to trade up specifically to snatch Lindborg before the Warriors could reach him at 17. A prospect the Warriors valued this highly would have drawn that kind of attention. Add it all up, and the conclusion becomes clear. Trading down to number 17 carried a serious risk that Golden State simply does not come away with the player it wanted. Saving a few spots and collecting some future assets sounds appealing on paper, but the danger watching a rival leapfrog you to grab your guy is exactly the nightmare front offices try to avoid. The verdict comes down to how Lindborg pans out. If he develops into the contributor the Warriors believe he can be, the front office will look back on this night and feel completely justified in rejecting the Thunder's package. Sometimes the best trade is the one you choose not to make, and Golden State is betting that holding its ground at number 11 will prove to be the wiser path. With the draft in the books and the roster taking shape, attention now turns to the most practical question of all. What will Golden State actually look like when the ball goes up for the 2026-27 season? By adding Yaxel Lindborg to the draft and bringing back Al Horford, the Warriors have deepened their rotation. The next step is figuring out who starts, who comes off the bench, and how the minutes get divided. One important note frames this entire projection. Jimmy Butler and Moses Moody are both dealing with knee injuries and are left out of this picture. Their eventual returns will reshape things, but for now the rotation has to be built around the players expected to be available on opening night. The projected starting five. At point guard, Stephen Curry remains the engine, untouchable as a centerpiece of everything Golden State does. Brandon Podziemski slots in at shooting guard, continuing his rise as a key young piece. Guay Santos gets a nod at small forward. Draymond Green anchors the lineup at power forward, and Kristaps Porzingis projects to open the season at center. There are a couple of moving parts inside that group. Porzingis is technically an unrestricted free agent, but he is widely expected to be re-signed, which is why he appears in the starting five. Green, meanwhile, holds a player option he must decide on by June 29th, a date worth circling for anyone tracking the team's offseason. The single most intriguing question in the entire projection is whether the rookie Lindborg can wrestle the starting small forward job away from Santos right away. For now, the edge goes to Santos. He earned that benefit of the doubt by averaging 15.4 points over the final 31 games of the previous season, a strong finishing kick that suggests he is ready to handle a starting role. Lindborg will have to prove he belongs ahead of a player trending upward, plugging in the free agent additions. The starting five only tells part of the story. The Warriors are expected to use a mid-level exception on a scoring guard to shore up the backcourt behind Curry. Once that backup point guard is secured, the next priority is a wing who specializes as an on-ball defender, the kind of player who can take the toughest perimeter assignment off Curry's plate. Keon Ellis fits that description almost perfectly. The open question is the cost. Would Ellis come aboard on a veteran minimum deal, or would the Warriors need to carve out additional cap room to offer him a slice of the larger mid-level exception? If the price climbs too high, Golden State would likely pivot to a similar defensive-minded option to fill that rotation spot until Butler and Moody are healthy again. The rotation by minutes. A healthy rotation, with everyone but Butler and Moody available, lands at roughly 10 players deep. At point guard, Curry would handle about 32 minutes a night, with a free agent scoring guard taking the other 20. In the backcourt, Podziemski project for around 30 minutes, with Will Richard absorbing 14. On the wing, Santos and defensive specialists would split the position, while up front Green shares time with Lindborg, and Porzingis splits center duties with Horford. That structure exposes one of the team's clearest vulnerabilities, point-of-attack defense. Podziemski has typically operated as an off-ball defender, and Santos does not move laterally well enough to corral explosive opposing guards. If that weakness gets exploited often enough, the coaching staff has built-in answers. Inserting a defender like Will Richard or a rangy guard into the starting group would let someone other than Curry chase the opponent's best perimeter scorer, preserving the franchise cornerstone's energy for the offensive end. Locks, risks, and the final roster spots. Green and Porzingis look like locks to start on opening night. There is one caveat worth flagging. If Green slips into another extended slump like the one that dragged through the second half of the previous season, his grip on a starting role could loosen. Should that happen, the door would open for both Santos and Lindebord to crack the first unit together, a lineup shift that would lean younger and more athletic. Finally, there's the matter of the last few roster spots. The Warriors are expected to add a center who can step in whenever Horford or Porzingis is unavailable. Because of how often that backup big would actually play, this is not a throwaway decision. The team needs to get it right rather than treating it as a routine end-of-bench addition. The likely route is a veteran minimum contract, and the in-house candidates already on the radar include Quentin Post and Charles Bassey, both of whom could compete to be the emergency option in the middle. Put all together, and the portrait is of a roster with a clear top end, real depth questions on a wing and in the backcourt, and a few decisions still pending that will determine just how dangerous Golden State can be. The stars are in place. Now the front office has to surround them with the right supporting cast, and the choices made over the coming weeks will define the ceiling for the season ahead.